All right, we're back with another edition of the Big E Breakdown basketball style as we're heating up into March now. We're less than a month away from the ASUN tournament, gentlemen.
Yeah, in Eastern Kentucky and on the men's side, because they start that tournament with the play-in games on a Sunday. When they play on Thursday night, it will be the first of six games in a 14-day span. So there's no more of this just Thursday, Saturday rotation. We're playing on Tuesday, Monday, and Wednesday before we end it out. Welcome to the ASUN, folks.
We'll talk a little bit about the women here in a little while, but right now, A.W. Hamilton's team rolling five in a row. They're a half court shot away from winning six in a row. Just guys, what have you seen so far in this little streak?
We're playing team ball, and that's the biggest thing. And I think uh, I don't know that it was necessarily the so-called proverbial team meeting, but after the loss to Stetson, all the guys got together to kind of hash things out. And since then, they've won the five games. I talked to Turner Buttrey and A.W. Hamilton about it during the road trip in Florida. And the main message, and Turner Buttrey's become a leader of this team off the court. The message was, we got to get in the gym more. We got to get shots up. We're not shooting the ball well enough. And player after player after player, beyond the individual workouts, has gone in before, after practice and gotten more shots up. And I think we've seen the team move the ball better and shoot the ball better.
Yeah, and you look at the three guys that we were talking about the last time as being X factors. They've all stepped up. You got Jordan Crawford, Jackson Holt, Myra Wall. Those three guys have really, really contributed off the bench, and it's given Eastern that consistency that they were looking for, to have other people contribute and be able to give Kimball and uh, Blanton a little bit of help in the scoring area. And then Turner Buttrey, like you said, I mean, he's played lights out since he got into the starting lineup. Uh, he's turned the whole team around. And it's not one guy, but it is an important factor that the way he's been able to come in and start and play so well.
Yeah, they've really, and even I think Tay Blanton goes lost. His points are not as high, but look what he did in both games down in Florida, 7 assists. So EKU's adjusted to the doubles on Blanton, and now all of a sudden, the way the other guys are shooting the ball, you can't do that. So EKU's in a good spot. Sans the future of George Kimball, and let's address that real quick. He tweaked a knee, his left knee, in the game down at Stetson. I didn't catch it when it happened, and they had to go look back at film to see when did he get injured, because all of a sudden he's not playing late in the first half. I thought maybe they're just resting him because of the big lead they had, but he only played 9 minutes in that game. He's getting an MRI. We taped this on Monday. He's getting the MRI, and I think about the only thing we can say is fingers crossed. It didn't look to be a season-ending injury when it happened, but they'll check the knee and tune in at 6:30 on the pregame show on Thursday when the Colonels play at home, and you'll find out from A.W. Hamilton about whether Kimball will play on Thursday night and what his status is for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and he's such a dynamic part of the team because he has the ability just to take over. When he gets going, it brings Eastern up to another level, and he's pretty much unstoppable as far as getting his shot. And when he gets that three ball rolling and he gets into the paint, Eastern just becomes a different team.
You take a look at the Florida Gulf Coast game. His parents and family were sitting right behind me in the first row because he's from Tampa. He goes 0 for 8 and misses four threes, four twos. And then with 47 seconds to go in the first half, he hits one of his two threes right at the end of the first half to push that lead up to 15. The rest of the game, the last 21 minutes, he goes 21 points, 6 of 8 from the field and 5 of 6 from three. I dare to say it. He's a first team all conference player. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But you know who else, Doug, is almost at the all conference level now? Is Mont Myrick. I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think Buttrey's been tremendous, but Mont Myrick's contribution, and he played through a shoulder that was banged up a little bit, has been off the charts, beyond what anybody expected.
Yeah. He's the unsung hero out of this team, I think. He does so many things that go unnoticed. He guards guys that are much bigger than him most nights. He has great anticipation. He knows how to get offensive rebounds. He's a great offensive rebounder. He sets good screens. He runs the floor hard. He's a vocal leader on defense. He's always talking on defense to the other guys, and he's a leader. And beyond that, I've talked to some of the guys. They say he's the funniest guy on the team.
Well, there's no Terrius Johnson on this team from 2014 who could have been a stand-up comedian, but he has really quietly led this team in so many different ways. And A.W. Hamilton's got all kinds of options out there now. And if Kimball can't go in a game or two or whatever happens, they'll lean on Crawford, who would move into the starting lineup. They'll lean on Buttrey to get the ball up court. But the way Blanton can pass the ball and you can bring him out, and he's a medium range guy in the post, he'll be a point one at times. I mean, he'll come out there and play the point guard in the half court, won't he?
Yeah, he's kind of a point forward anyway. And you see when Kimball goes out for a rest, he brings the ball up a lot of times to get them into their offense. And then the way the offense is set up, he can still be the go-to guy when they isolate for him. So he just takes on another role, but he's comfortable in that because they've worked with him in that situation since the beginning of practice back in the fall.
Well, we go in, and I know before we look ahead to the two games and then get to the women, Florida Gulf Coast, Lipscomb, Jacksonville, and UNA are all 9-3. But if you look at those teams, the destiny for Eastern Kentucky is in their hands except for UNA, who they only play once. They have the advantage right now over those other teams if they could get series wins. They've already got a series win over Florida Gulf Coast. From going from before the Florida road trip, the thought of, okay, at least split so you try to avoid playing what I call the play-in game before you get to the quarterfinals. All of a sudden, they're looking potential. I mean, they're in the race for a conference championship or at least a share, but they're also they control their destiny to get a home game in the quarterfinals and maybe more depending on what happens. So again, one game at a time, but a whole lot better after we came back with a lot of sunshine in the Sunshine State.
That was huge down there in Florida. I know I was talking to AW before, and he was talking about how tough it was going to be down at Florida Gulf Coast. And then, we had a little revenge factor with Stetson. But I think over the last 3 weeks, Eastern has gone through the roof with their confidence. And I think it's apparent that they can play with anybody in the league. The top teams, they've been able to defeat Lipscomb on their home floor, Florida Gulf Coast on their home floor. So no matter how this shakes out with the tournament, they have that feeling that they can beat anybody. And that's what you need.
Yeah, I still think Lipscomb, Florida Gulf Coast, Jacksonville, and North Alabama, and we'll see Queens if they can pull an upset over EKU. I think they're all legitimate contenders for the championship. From what I saw from Stetson, reading body language, seeing the starting lineup they used, scratch them. They're not going to compete for a championship. They may knock somebody off, but I was not impressed with what I saw from Stetson on Saturday, and give EKU credit for that. But Stetson's struggling in a big way right now.
They were, and you think when you go to a lineup like they did, something else was going on under the table that you don't know about. So, they've got some troubles right now, and they're kind of trending toward the bottom of the league instead of moving up.
And right now, it's a big game for both West Georgia, who comes in here, and then they go to Bellarmine, because right now West Georgia and UCA are down there fighting 2 games ahead of Bellarmine, but fighting for that last spot to get into the tournament. And we know what the 9-10 did last year. I mean, Jacksonville, but I don't see a Jacksonville like 9 or 10 down there this year. The league's not as deep as it was last season.
Yeah, I had a chance to watch West Georgia on film, and their talent level is not there yet as far as Division I. I'm not saying they don't have good players, but they've struggled at times, and they're still trying to find themselves. You know how it is when you go from D2 to D1. That's a big step, and I don't think their talent level is right there, but we'll see what happens Thursday. It's a game that Eastern cannot take for granted for sure.
Yeah, their top players, their top rebounder, and their top scorer, and Sheldon Williams Is it Dryden? And so when you look at them, when I'll watch scores as we're at like a shoot around if they play the day before, they'll be real close with the team, but they can't seem to sustain 40 minutes most of the time, even though they have a 20-point win over North Florida. They did beat Austin Peay. So they're capable of pulling an upset. I think Queens is the one who'll be the bigger challenge because they've got this Leo Colomero, who's is tremendous. Fresno State graduate from Brazil. He's had huge games, and you put him with Chris Ashby out at guard and Queens. They've got a really good coach. That'll be a big challenge Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, plus they have an inside presence, a 7-footer that's leading the country in shots blocked, and we're familiar with how that is when we had Isaiah Cozart last year. So they've got an inside-out presence, and they're going to pose some problems for EKU.
I think
Big weekend, you got to win them. You got to win your last 3 at home because your last 3 are on the road.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Queens is going to be a really fascinating story to watch as we go throughout the rest of the year. They're obviously toward the top of the league, but then how do they react being in the tournament, knowing they can't achieve the ultimate goal and making the tournament field if you win the conference, but they can play the role of spoiler.
And again, this is just Greg's opinion, okay? I understand why you allow a team because it's about the athletes to be in the tournament, but you're playing a tournament to determine the automatic bid to the NCAA. And you have 2 teams that can't get that automatic bid that are in the tournament.
Yeah.
To me, they can play with house money with no pressure on them, while the others have all the pressure in the world. It happened with the Bellarmine team against Jacksonville a few years ago. I don't understand it. I do in one way, but I think what's the tournament designed to do?
Yeah.
It's designed to determine who gets the automatic bid. My opinion. Right. I'm sure some people disagree with me.
I'm with you, Greg. I think either you say that those teams are ineligible for the tournament so they don't screw everybody else up, or the NCAA makes it where they're eligible automatically as soon as they get to D1. It's got to be one or the other, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's bizarre the way they sometimes say it's about the student athlete, and then other times it isn't. Like, for instance, in the NCAA stats, they list all the stats of the 9 teams this year reclassifying, but they don't put them in the rankings individually.
You have to complete that 4-year transition.
Yeah, and Bellarmine knew the rules back when they won it, and then they complained after that they should have been in. But you can't complain after the fact. If you move up, that's the rule. I don't know that the rule's correct, but on the other hand, it is what it is. I just think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Just my opinion. I think we're trending toward it being the opposite way. I don't see in a couple years that 4-year transition will be in effect. I think that I think it'll be from day one. Yeah.
How about women's basketball? Almost pulled the upset.
Yeah. Came within a shot to force overtime there against the almighty Queens of Florida Gulf Coast, and that they had a shot. They were right there, and just I'm going to pull a line from the West Georgia football coach, Greg, and I feel like the better team lost that game because the way that EKU forced Florida Gulf Coast to play, they didn't play their best, and I thought EKU played really well. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. So I felt like the better team lost. I know that's weird to say, but you kind of feel that way if you're a Colonel fan.
Well, I was busy doing the men's game down in DeLand, but EKU won 3 of the 4 quarters, point-wise.
Yeah. Jumped out to a 6-0 lead there to start the game, and that's where Florida Gulf Coast is so strong. They do a lot of their damage in the first quarter, and they have a 10 to 12 point lead at the end of the first quarter, and they just slowly add to it, and it builds up to a 25-point win at the end. So EKU took them out of their game from the opening tap, literally, and they applied some pressure on Florida Gulf Coast, and they had never been tested like that in almost 3 years. So it was interesting to see how Florida Gulf Coast played in those tight situations, and they almost coughed one up.
Central Arkansas's only game behind them is Central Arkansas still poised to be the one that could knock them off the pedestal, or with what EKU did? I mean, obviously they're not going to play them. They're not going to get them on their home court again, so that's a disadvantage.
Yeah, yeah. I know the other teams that play Florida Gulf Coast throughout the year are probably popping on that EKU game tape to see how EKU was able to have a had a shot there to potentially force overtime and then win the game in overtime. But I think of all the teams that are poised to do it, it's Central Arkansas. They've kind of applied pressure on Florida Gulf Coast because usually by now Florida Gulf Coast has a 3-4 game lead on everybody else and getting ready to wrap up the one seed. But they have applied just enough pressure to be within striking distance, and they only play one time, and they'll play in Conway. I believe it's next weekend that those two will play. So that game will probably be for the top seed, and Central Arkansas has positioned themselves to be right there. If they can knock off and win that game, that they could have the tiebreaker and be the one seed.
Is Florida Gulf Coast a two-bid league if they get knocked off in the tournament to the NCAA?
You can make a case, but I don't see that case happening. If you look at their net ranking, it's probably about it's well when they played EKU at 63. So they're right there kind of on the borderline of if you're ranking tournament teams. They really don't have a signature top 25 rank win that they usually do in the last couple of years. They've got some pretty good wins. They beat Cincinnati. They they had some close games with some other really good mid-major team. Only lost by 2 to Columbia, but I don't think they have the resume this year to potentially do that. It would you go 17-1 in the conference. It'd be hard not to include somebody, but I don't know if the strength of schedule is that such that where Florida Gulf Coast can be in there.
Looking at the two box scores while you were doing home games and I was on the road, the reemergence in the post of Jasmine McGinnis Taylor certainly helps.
It does. It does. She was big there, and she was kind of the go-to weapon for EKU in that game. And she's playing under control the last couple of games, which is something she maybe hasn't done as much in the last 2 or 3 weeks. She's playing under control, picking better spots to be aggressive and not pick up a silly foul going over the back when you're 85 feet away from the basket. And Florida Gulf Coast tried everything in their power to frustrate her. I gotta say, I think Florida Gulf Coast might have an NIL deal with somebody down there in Fort Myers for every time that they flopped. They got $1,000 or something. I never seen a team flop as much on Jasmine McGinnis Taylor and the rest of the team as Florida Gulf Coast did. They were
I
on the
hear
floor constantly.
they work out with the soccer team.
apparently, apparently, it was bizarre. And there were situations where I felt like the officials could have gave a flop warning, but never happened. And some of the officials bit on some of those flops. And in a tight game like that, it kind of makes you question if they had gone the other way, what could have happened. So, but I got to give McGinnis Taylor a lot of credit. She played under control. She did what she was supposed to do.
Well, all you got to do is read the tea leaves. If calm, cool, laid back Greg Todd is barking at the officials more than normal, that ought to tell you something. I
Yeah.
saw that saw that on video. So what's we've talked about the status of EKU before we wrap here, Wes. Where does the I know EKU women got to go to the Queen City and to the River City
Mhm.
here over the next few days. Queens and Bellarmine and two tough road games. But where do they stand as far as their tournament situation?
Yeah, right now they're right on that outside looking in potentially to host a postseason game. It kind of stung that you played so well and you were right there on the cusp of playing for a home game because you're right there in that final spot. And then some other results didn't go your way. So now you're on the outside looking in after you lose. So now they're in a tie for sixth because of the results last weekend. So now it's four straight on the road. And EKU has had some struggles on the road this year. So they'll have to play really well against Queens. And Queens is a team that just knocked off Austin P down on the women's side as well. So that's not going to be an easy matchup for EKU as opposed. You look at their record, and yeah, they're at the bottom, but they do have that win over Austin P, who beat Eastern Kentucky earlier this year. It's not going to be easy. So you have four critical games, and you can't afford to split or go 1-3. You have to at least go 3-1 because you have two really tough games to end the regular year in Lipscomb and Central Arkansas.
Yeah, both for the men and women, the schedule's not easy down the stretch. EKU on the men's side, the only team to play their last three games on the road. All four Florida schools play all four of their last four inside their own state.
Yeah.
And I think Lipscomb probably has the easiest path if you look at past results on the men's side. But the good thing about Eastern Kentucky on the men's side now is they're now 2 games up on the teams that
Yeah.
are in that 7 spot. So the way things should break, unless you have it comes off the rails, EKU at least should not have to play in the play-in game, the two that will be played to determine quarterfinal rounds. The women, a little bit more dicey right now, right?
It is, yeah, and potentially because coming into the weekend, there was one game separating 3 from 9. Now it's a little bit more spaced out, but you could really, depending on the weekend, you could find yourself up toward the top or find yourself up toward the bottom. And you always go back to the schedule and how it shaped out. And you look at the second, third, fourth, and fifth place teams right now in the standings. I hate to say this because I don't want to sound like that person, but they only had to play Florida Gulf Coast once. Whereas EKU and some of the other teams toward the middle and the bottom, they had to play Gulf Coast twice. And that makes a difference when you're playing the top team twice. And when you look at a second loss to them, it could be determined whether you're, in Fort Myers for a potential play-in game or whether you're going to Conway or whether you're going to Nashville.
Yeah, well, you've got 12 teams. You play four only once, two at
Mhm.
home, two away, and it's kind of just the roll of the dice. At
Yeah,
least we moved from 16 to 18 games, and I don't know if you could get to 22, but I think going to 20 makes sense. And I think another thing that would make more scheduling sense, because I at times don't make sense of it, at the end of the year, you ought to be playing the teams closest to you. So for EKU, their
yeah,
last 3 games ought to be Bellarmine, Austin P, and Lipscomb. And you could say the same thing. Geographically as close as you can get. You shouldn't be going to Florida for the last 2 games of the year
right.
or having a long road trip. But again, there's all kinds of factors we don't know about that go into scheduling, right? It's not an easy thing. Nobody's going to be completely happy when it comes to the schedule. And for EKU, hey, they went to Florida and won too. So let's get off of the bus into
Absolutely.
warm weather. We're not in Mattoon, Illinois anymore, thank goodness. And we got 2 wins.
Did you go out in the hotel and soak up some rays?
No, you know
No?
me. I'm at the desk working. On a bus, off a bus, into the gym, out of the gym, to the meeting room, up to my desk, working
Yeah.
more. I did take
Going to
one
the
walk.
business center?
I, I didn't burn up any paper in the business center, but I did walk down the main street, the pretty little town of DeLand, got a coffee and came back. So I got one little stroll in, but that was it. I'm
Were
not
they having
like
the
you.
dog
I
Mardi
don't
Gras
know. I
that
don't.
time, Greg?
Huh?
Did
I
they
didn't
have the
hear you.
dog Mardi Gras parade this year?
It's coming in a couple of weeks. No, we missed that. I didn't have a room that could look over the street anyway. I was looking over the beautiful sidewalk parking lot this year. But man, it was a good road trip. I did not. I'll be honest. I didn't expect a sweep, but we got it. Now we got to sweep the 2 here at home before we go into our third game at home. Who's our third one will be on paper the toughest with Lipscomb coming in.
Lipscomb.
They're back playing well again.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can't take anything for granted. So you got to take care of West Georgia first before
Yep.
you worry about the others.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, I will be on the air on Wednesday, not the normal Thursday, Wednesday night down in Charlotte for the women 6:30 pregame, 7 o'clock tip. Greg and Doug, you guys will be on Thursday back home at Baptist Health Arena, 6:30 airtime on the radio and 7 o'clock on ESPN Plus. Any last words?
Well, we
I
hope
just like
George King gets good news from the
Yeah,
MRI. That's a big one. It'll have an impact on the team, but you got to play with the cards dealt you. And good luck to what that says. Listen on the pregame to find out what the status is.
Yeah, I just like the way both teams are gelling right now. They're on the uptick, and they're playing their best basketball, and that's what you want to do when you get to this point of the season.
Yep. Should be fun. Should make February and into March, hopefully, a lot of fun. We'll try to have one more of these before
Yep.
we begin the postseason. We'll preview all the postseason pictures and try to organize all that chaos for you as well. So, gentlemen, thanks for your time.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Wes.
Go Big Game.